Hello, welcome to Boardgames with Niramas. I'm Joseph, I'm here with Racco, and today, top 5 beginner tips in Ark Nova. It's part of the series of top 5 things in Ark Nova that we are doing. This is one of these episodes where we will cover 5 things. Now, this time it will be more my opinions after playing the game a bunch of times all through this year, and it's going to be tips for you who are new to the game and to get into some ways to think in the game that you might not be that used to. There are some special things in this game that aren't that typical for board games of this kind, and some things that I have struggled with myself coming from a background of playing a lot of board games. So hopefully these tips can help you out to get into the game and enjoy Ark Nova. So let's get started with number 5. So at number 5 we start off with the base mechanic of the game, the action cards. These 5 cards that all the players have when you start the game. You will have animals at 1, the other ones will be randomized, so depending on that things might shift and so on, how you start, what your first actions will be in the game. Now, I'm not going to explain how the game works because I do that in my playthrough together with Draco. That you can find if you haven't seen this game before and you're curious how does it play. Well, go to the playlist down in the video description where you will find all my Ark Nova videos, and one of them will be the 2-player playthrough I did with Draco just when the game came out last year, where I explained how all the things in the game work. Anyway, now let's get to the actual tips. So, the rotation of these cards are very important. This is what drives your actions in the game, obviously. Now, one thing that a lot of players do miss at the beginning of the game especially is that you have a special action you can do. So on my turn, if I don't have any money to build, and the stage of the game now is just at the end of one of my solo games, so don't mind that. Let's say I don't have any money to build. I don't have any workers more to place for my association action. I don't have a sponsor card. I don't really have a good card that I want to do right now. Maybe I'm looking to do the cards action, but it's only on 2. What you can do is, the special action is, you can take any card, just use it, sort of, or activate it, but don't do anything. You will slide it down to the 1 spot, and you will get an X token. The X tokens in this game is amazing. I say this all the time, but this is so good, these X tokens, that make it so you can do another time. The next time it's your turn, you can do the card with the next token, and now all of a sudden it's on the 4 strength. Really, really good, and really good to not forget about that, because it's easy to forget about at the beginning of the game. Another thing I will say about the card rotation is also maybe obvious, but I do want to say it because it can be hard to get into the mindset when you start playing this game. Unless you maybe have played Civilization and New Dawn, which is where this game mechanic comes from, basically. In that game you have a very similar one that this builds on. So you have to plan. This is how the main thought process of the game is, right? Where you have to plan, like, okay, I want to do sponsors now. That means it will end up on 1, which will push everything up. So do I want to do animals over here, and so on. You have to think that through. All through the game, you have to have a plan for in which order you do these actions so that you get the most efficiency out of them. And my number 4 beginner tips in Ark Nova is to get some early conservation points. Now, this is especially, I would say, in the multiplayer game. This is something I use a lot, but maybe sometimes in the solo game as well. I'll get more into that in my top 5 solo tips video. But early conservation points, now you know about this obviously because you learned the game, the basics of it. You get to take one of these cubes when you claim something. If I have, for instance, 5, 4, or 2 America symbols, icons out here, then I can claim one of these spots by going to the 5th spot here over as the association action. But a lot of times it's a good idea to do it early, to get those first 2 points. Just get one of these. Soon as you can play like 2 maybe cheap animals early on, maybe small easy animals to play, and you have 2 icons. It could be like 2 predators, or then you can go claim it and get 2. And 2 sounds a little bit bad because you can get 5 if you just wait, right? Well, one of these, I mean, you will have different number of these depending on the number of players in the game. You will have a different number of these conservation projects out, and then more will come as well out here on the map. But what you really are doing here is you're going for the first 2 spots over here where you get to flip a card, which is upgrading it, or to get 1 more of these workers. Because at the beginning of the game, you will have it like this, right? So you'll have 3 here, and you only have access to 1. Getting a second one could be super good early, depending on your strategy. Now, I will say, though, I will advise you, if you don't go for the flipping of a card when you get there, you will never flip more than 3 cards, because there's only those that is one of the only 4 spots or times when you get to do it. You have the one on the university, you have the one on here, and you have the one out here on the reputation track. So, I mean, you can play a game fine just flipping 3 cards. That could be totally fine depending on what the situation is, what kind of strategy you're playing, and what kind of cards you have, all of those things. It's very hard to give a general tip like that, but I will say getting those 2 conservation points early, super good. Also getting more conservation points pretty early. Again, you don't have to wait for the 5. If you can manage to get to 5 in total, it could be from cards you play, it could be that action and so on. If you can get to 5, you get to take one of these bonuses as well. Usually very good bonuses. And in a multiplayer game, it's a race. So if you're playing a 4-player game, only 2 players get to pick these 2 probably better than 5 money bonuses. So early conservation points, and last thing to say about that is you also get to remove one of these cubes, right? Which is also super good. So if you claim the primates early on, only on 2, well, you get those 2 conservation points, you get to flip a card or get another worker, but you also get, and then I recommend you take one of these purple ones that give you income. Depending on which map you're playing, this will look different, but it will give you an income for every break for the rest of the game. You will get to snap a card, you can get to build for free at the 2 size enclosure, or you can get, in this case, 5 money as an extra income. That is super good, and you want to get that as early as possible so that it generates more things for you in the total of the game, right? All right, now let's head to my next tip. And at number 3, this is a bit quicker one. I just want to talk a little bit about the break timing. Because when I started playing this game, I felt at first that the break thing, this whole thing with the multiplayer, with this little coffee mug, which I thought was a mountain at first because it's a really weird shape. When this one gets over here, you get the break, right? In the multiplayer game, in the solo game, instead you have this little tile that tells you when all these actions have been done, you get the break. So the timing of that, both in the solo game and especially in the multiplayer game, is super important. And this was a bit hard for me to get into, but I also, when I started getting into it and started seeing how you can use it to your advantage, it can be really fun. So one thing that it has in its soul here is the limitation of number of cards you can have in your hand. So if you have, of course, if you have more than 3 cards and you don't have this certain university tile, then you will have to discard down. This gives you a hand size of 5 instead. So if you have a lot of cards, if you picked up a bunch of cards, let's say in the first round, then you don't want to do the sponsor and the card. Well, if you do the card section, you will break 2 and so on. But you want to avoid, you want to wait for that break if you have cards that you want to keep. On the flip side, though, if your opponent's sitting there with, like, Draco has like 5 cards in hand, and I only have like 2 or 3, and he doesn't have this hand size increase, I might push the break so that he has to discard from his hand. That is really mean, but it's also a very good strategy in this, especially in the early game there. I mean, at some point, usually people will pick this one up. But again, there's only one of these each out at the start of the first round. If your association action is to go there, grab that one, nobody else can get it in the first round. And then everyone starts with 4 cards. They might have picked up more cards. You push the break and you can mess up the other player's start, which could be really strong. So break timing is super important in Ark Nova, and hopefully this little tip here gets your mindset more into thinking about the break and how it will affect things. Also, it will give you income. If you need money, you might want to push the break so you get there sooner, so you get a fresh money in your bank. And then at number 2, I want to talk about something else that I had a little bit of an issue coming into the right way to think about as I started playing Ark Nova, and that's the kiosks and pavilions. So when you build, you're mostly focusing on, of course, building enclosures where you can put your animals in, and maybe you want to get those special, like you can have birds in a house, you can have the petting zoo animals, all that stuff. Don't forget about the kiosk and pavilions, though. Now, the kiosks, I would say, are more important in the multiplayer game than in the solo game in general, because in the solo game, you usually have more money, depending on where you start on the appeal. In the multiplayer game, you start very low on money, so getting some kiosks early on can be super good. Now, of course, the kiosks has to be next to something that is flipped, so like you have to have an enclosure. This wouldn't give you any money. You have to have something in there. Otherwise, people won't go to the kiosk because there's no animals next to it that they can check out. Don't forget this rule, which is easy to forget. The kiosk has to be 2 spaces away from each other. So you can't place a kiosk like here because that would break the rule. It would be Well, it has to be 3 spaces. It has to be 2 empty spaces, and then that wouldn't work. Yeah, it has to be like that. You could do that. That is important. Anyway, the pavilion as well, it's really good. Now, the pavilion gives you 1 appeal, but the pavilion together with the kiosks, like here, the pavilion counts as a flipped tile. So that will also give you 1 money income if it's next to a kiosk. And that one doesn't have any spatial regulations on how you can place it. That 1 appeal could also be very important. A lot of times you might be standing like this. Just 1 more appeal before the break will push you from 20 to 21, so that will also give you income right away. So yeah, the pavilions and kiosks can be overlooked when you start playing the game, but don't forget about them. And number 1, my best tip that I can give you if you're new to Ark Nova and you're trying to improve in the game is to play things from the market, or at least remember that you can do so, because I forgot about this at least the first 10, 15 times or whatever I played the game. I had a really hard time getting into the mindset of this, because playing a lot of Terraforming Mars, for example, playing a lot of other board games where you have cards out there. You don't have that in Terraforming Mars, but you know what I mean. You have cards out there, you have a market row, you have cards out there that you could get access to. My mindset was so much into like, okay, I'll do the cards action, pick up the card, then I'll do the animals and play it. And that's sometimes a wasted action, especially at the later game when you have these 3 cards flipped. These are the 3 important ones in this case. It's animal, sponsors, and association. Once you have these flipped to the upgraded side, you can play things right from out here, which can be super efficient, especially again in the solo game where you have limited amount of rounds. This can be super important, but in the multiplayer game, at the end of the game, there's a lot of timing involved as well, because whoever meets up with their scoring markers will trigger the end of the game and everyone else gets 1 more turn. So at that stage, timing can be super important, and being efficient with your actions is super important. So like in this situation right here, it has to do with reputation level. So if you want to, like right now, my reputation level is up here, which means I could play all the cards from down here with the appropriate action. So for the animal action, I can play animal card from my hand or from within my reputation range. It does have additional cost, but at that stage it doesn't really matter much. Like if I want to play this little animal over here, well, it's in the 2 slots, so it would cost me 2 money to play it straight from out here. But it saves me a whole action, doing the cards action, picking it up and all that. Now, if you play it out right here, you just play it like normal. Super good. Same goes here for sponsors. I can do the Rhesus Monkey Park out here because it's within my reputation range when I have this upgraded. And then, again, I'll just have to pay 3 extra cash, no big deal, and I can just play it straight from out there. And you can even do this with the association when I could claim this one or play this one right into the slot here, and then I can claim one of those slots that, I can achieve. So good. And it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to overlook. And I don't think this is just me. I've seen my friends do this as well, where at the sort of end of the game, they're sitting there and they're doing like, oh, let's do cards, pick this up. And then on the next turn, they'll play whatever card it is to use that one. So don't forget about that. That is a really cool aspect of the game as well. And I think it's pretty unique. I don't really know of any other board game that has that sort of same gameplay thing in it. So yeah, that's my 5 tips for beginners in Ark Nova. I hope that one can help you out. If you have other tips, or you want to share with the community, with other viewers, tell us in the comment section down here. Tell us your tips for beginners in Ark Nova. What is easy to miss? What is easier to overlook, and so on. Let's all get better together in Ark Nova. A great game, wonderful game, and I hope that you enjoyed watching this. And if you did, press the thumbs up, like the video, and also become a subscriber so you will also get notifications from YouTube when I post new videos. There's lots more fun Ark Nova and other board game videos coming on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening or morning or whenever you're watching. Take care. Bye bye.